some from the subreddit nosleep, and some from the subreddit scary stories. None of these stories are mine or belong to me. I will include all of the users' names and also write them down in the description box for you. So if you like them, please go check them out on Reddit. Let's just get straight into it. The first story I have is by the user Paranoid Letters and is in the subreddit No Sleep. The title is, "Last night I boarded the last train to hell." It was my third week living in a small town called Gadala. It wasn't even an option. The company I worked for had just opened a unit in that town, and as one of their senior employees, I was assigned to oversee the opening process. I was required to stay there for 3 to 4 months. Gadala, I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong, wasn't a bad place. As a matter of fact, it was one of the quietest and most beautiful small towns I have ever been to. I really enjoyed the peacefulness, the chirping sounds of birds, the flowing water in the river, and the rustling of trees swayed by the wind. The apartment my company rented for me was about a 15-minute train ride away, or a 45-minute trip by bus. So when I had to work overtime until nearly midnight that day, and there were no buses available, the only option left to go home was by train. I stood on the train station platform, raised my hand to check the time on my wristwatch, and wondered when the next train would arrive. It was 11:45 p.m. and I still saw a few people standing there, waiting for the last train. Then, a few minutes later, precisely at 11:50 p.m, I saw an oncoming train entering the station. There it is, I thought. The train stopped and opened its doors. I looked around. There were about 5 or 6 other people, but no one seemed to move. I was the only one who stepped inside. One of the ladies standing just a few meters from me looked startled when she saw me board the train. "Isn't this supposed to be the last train?" I wondered as I took a seat. The train car I was in wasn't full, which made sense since it was nearly midnight, but it was at least half occupied, which seemed odd for this late hour. As I waited for the train to arrive at my station, I pulled out my phone to check if I had any messages from friends, family or colleagues. There was one. It was from Caleb. Caleb was my co-worker. He was a local and had also worked overtime with me that night, but his place was just around the corner from the office. "Hey man," Caleb said in his text. "I don't know if anyone has ever told you this, but I guess it's better to tell you regardless. I forgot to mention it back at the office. The last train in this town is precisely at 12 midnight, Caleb continued. The previous one is at 11:15 p.m, so if you ever see a train arriving between 11:15 and 12, do not board it. The message was sent at 11:10 p.m, right when I had just left the office." "Why?" I asked. Caleb replied quickly. "Let's just say there's an urban legend about it that's been going around for generations. No one boards a train that arrives between 11:15 and 12. station if it takes me the wrong way. Why do you sound like you're already inside the train? He asked. I am, I replied. The train arrived at 11:50 p.m. and I hopped in. It's already departed. It took him a while to respond. Then he replied with only one word. Shit. Okay, that was odd. Care to explain, Caleb? I typed, but before I could send the message, my phone lost signal. No text, no calls, no internet, nothing. Weird. I looked out the window and noticed something strange. I had taken this train countless times, but never once had I seen mountains through the window. Cardala was a beach town. It didn't even have a single mountain. I had no idea where the train was headed, but it didn't seem like I had any other options, so I remained seated. I looked out the window again and saw a tunnel ahead. Within minutes, the train entered pitch darkness. Apart from the dim lighting inside the train, there was nothing. No lights, no signs. Then I felt the train slowing down, slowly, until I saw the light ahead of the end of the tunnel. I didn't know why, but I had a bad feeling. The moment the train exited the tunnel, I immediately saw a train station. That should have been a good thing, but something about the station looked eerie, wrong. The station's walls, pillars and ceilings were decorated with jagged rocks, as if it had been built inside a cave. The train slowed down more and more until it eventually stopped. I looked out the window. There were people standing on the platform, as if they were waiting to board. The moment the train stopped and the doors opened, an earthquake suddenly struck. The station's walls and floor cracked open, and from those cracks, flames burst out. The station turned scorching hot. It felt like hell. The passengers inside the train erupted in chilling cries. They screamed in horror, realizing what was about to befall them. Then, just seconds after the flames burst from the cracks, the people standing on the platform transformed. They became monstrous, 3 meters tall, with red skin and golden horns protruding from their heads. Demons. The passengers screamed even louder. 3 demons stood in front of my train car. Each one smashed a window, grabbed a passenger by the head, yanked them through the broken glass, and hurled them into the fiery cracks. I watched as the passengers struggled, trying to claw their way out of the flames. Their screams of agony echoed through the station, but one of the demons walked up and shoved their heads deeper into the fire. In seconds, they were gone. Consumed by fear, I instinctively ran out of the train's door and past the demons, who were too busy grabbing and throwing people into the flaming cracks to notice me. I had no idea what lay beyond the platform full of enraged demons, but staying there wasn't an option, so I ran through the station of hell. The next chamber I entered was even worse. People were being punched to pieces by the same kind of demons I had seen earlier, but they didn't die. Seconds after being torn apart, their bodies regenerated, only to be shattered again, over and over. Was there any way out of this hellish place? Anything at all? I didn't stop running, despite witnessing countless forms of human torture around me. Strangely, none of the demons seemed to pay attention to me, or so I thought. Then, without warning, a giant red hand grabbed me by my torso. It was one of the demons. This is the end of me, I thought. The demons lifted me to its eye level, staring intently, as if trying to observe me. I braced myself, expecting it to bite my head off. Instead, bones were fractured, if not already broken, but I forced myself up, thinking of trying to run past the demon, hoping for another way out. It growled again, then it charged at me. What choice did I have? None. I turned and ran back to the train. It was still there, its door open. I sprinted as fast as my battered body allowed, diving inside just as the demon reached the threshold. But it didn't follow me in. It stopped right outside the train's door. It didn't try to step in. It didn't even try to reach for me. It just stood there, silently. I took a look around. The car was empty. No one else was there. All of the passengers had been thrown into the fiery cracks. All of them. No one was left. No one but me. Yet none of the demons tried to take me. Not a single one. From the next train car I heard the same blood-curdling screams. It was happening there too. When the demons were done, silence fell. Then, as if nothing had happened, the demons transformed back into human forms. All the cracks were reversed and disappeared. The fire was gone. The train station's platform returned to normal. Seconds later, the train doors closed and the train departed. I was alive, but what the hell was that? I stayed in my seat, waiting for the train to stop at the next station. I didn't know where it would take me, but it couldn't be worse than the last one. Minutes passed, though it felt like an eternity. Then, finally, the train arrived at another station. It looked familiar. It was the station near my office, the very place where I had boarded the cursed train. As soon as the doors opened, I wasted no time. I leaped onto the platform. The moment I stepped off, the train pulled away, disappearing into the darkness. I looked around. No one was there. I remembered a large digital clock hanging near the platform. 11:01 a.m. Everything I had just experienced had lasted only 11 minutes, but it felt like forever. Then my phone vibrated. The signal had returned. It was a message from Caleb. Well, I can't really tell you for sure where that train goes, he wrote. I honestly don't know. The legend has been around for generations. Some of our great-grandparents accidentally boarded it and, thankfully, returned to tell the story. They said the train took them to hell or something like that. But that was generations ago, he continued. We all know there shouldn't be any trains between 11:15 and 12, so no one dares to board one, even if they see it. I've seen it a few times, he admitted, but I never got on, and I never planned to. I thought that was his last message, but then another one came. So, I don't know if the train actually goes to hell or not. I tapped the reply button on my chat app and responded to Caleb. It does. I really like that story. The next story is by the user. I'm gonna have to spell this one out. xegin. And it was under the subreddit Scary Stories. The title is Wrong Floor. Jim was sitting in the break room when he heard the static crackle come across the radio clipped to his hip. Groaning, he started to stand up and stretch. He knew all too well what that sound meant, and that he was a second away from getting more work. In moments like these, he would have been happy to be wrong, but he wasn't. His boss's voice crackled over the radio. There is a mess in the basement. Get down there and clean it up ASAP. Anytime they didn't say what the mess or issue was, he knew he had to be bad. He also knew from his boss's tone that it was better not to ask. "Yes, sir, I'm on it," Jim replied, brushing off his dark grey overalls. He took one more second to himself, combing back his short brown hair with his hand. Then he grabbed his cleaning cart, dragging it towards the freight elevator. The staff always got an earful from the boss if they ever used the elevator for guests, even though the freight elevator was out of commission half the time. Jim was in no rush to get to his mystery mess. Pressing the button for the elevator, he watched the numbers count, thinking they could take as long as they wanted. As he waited, he started to let his mind wander off, thinking about what to do for dinner. He was quickly snapped back to reality by the ding of the elevator. Blinking his eyes reminded himself what he was doing. Sliding his cleaning cart to the back of the elevator, he clicked the elevator button for the basement. Leaning back against the wall, he watched the numbers tick down, counting to himself. As the elevator neared the basement, he gave a small push off the wall, straightening himself back up. An unsettling turning started in his stomach. He figured it was dread from the mystery mess to come, but then he looked back up at the screen counting down the floors. The elevator had gone past the basement, and the numbers were counting down into the negatives. Then, strange symbols started appearing. Rubbing his eyes, he stared at the symbols, thinking he was seeing things or going crazy, but they didn't go anywhere. Suddenly, the elevator came to an abrupt stop, almost toppling him over. The doors slowly opened up to a floor Jim didn't recognize. After working in the building for 5 years, he had sworn he'd seen every inch of the building at least twice, but now he was confronted with something new. A beige hallway that stretched out in front of him. He started to drag the cleaning car behind him, only to change his mind, letting it slip out of his hand. There wasn't any reason to take it with him. After all, this wasn't where he had gotten called down to. The cleaning cart drifted to a stop in the elevator doorway, and the elevator began to make an annoyed beep from the blocked doors. Jim didn't pay any attention to the sound. He started walking down the hallway, wondering where it led and what in the world was down here. The hallway was surprisingly well lit, for there only being one overhead light off the distance. Near the light there was something else, a dark part of the wall. At a distance, Jim figured it had to be another hallway or a large stain on the wall. There was only one way to find out though, and his curiosity compelled him to check it out. He started walking towards the spot, only to find it was further away than he assumed. 5 minutes must have passed, and he didn't seem any closer to the spot. Was the hall some kind of optical illusion? Well, it couldn't stretch on forever. The thought of turning around hadn't crossed his mind. He had to know what was down on the other side of the hall now. Pressing on down the hall, the spot started to come into focus. It wasn't a stain on the wall, it was another hallway, or at least an alcove. That reassurance that it wasn't a complete waste of time gave Jim a boost of energy, speeding up his pace. Still, after another 5 minutes of walking, it started to feel strange that the hallway could be this long. Surely it had to be running under other buildings. Did the other buildings know what was under them? Maybe this was some forgotten system connecting them. As Jim got closer, he realized it was an alcove waiting up ahead for him. Nestled in the recess was a small tree that he had suspected to be about waist high. The peculiar thing about the tree is that it wasn't in a pot. The roots had pierced was a small, round lump, the shape of a pine cone, that Jim couldn't quite make out from where he was. The shape was too blurry to be fuzzy. After coming all the way down the hall, he figured he might as well see what it was. He knew he could already catch an earful from his boss about his little detour, but maybe his boss would understand. Did his boss even know about this place? If he did, he had never mentioned it. Walking towards the tree, it started to get larger and larger. So large, in fact, that it was the size of a full-grown tree camped inside the hallway that seemed to be expanding. Was this another optical illusion of the hallway, or had he swapped sizes with the tree? As Jim pondered that thought, he realized the tree wasn't the only thing that had grown in size. The small lump that had been nestled in the roots of the tree was now the size of a boulder. Only it no longer looked like a pine cone. It was a massive ball of black fur that started to twitch and move. 4 large arms the size of a gorilla unfurled from the lump of fur. The midsection of fur parted open to reveal an maw of jagged yellow teeth yawning open. Jim's heart was racing watching the creature stretch. He hadn't noticed any eyes and thought it might not be able to see him. This was more than Jim had bargained for. Keeping his eyes glued to the creature, he slowly started to back away. The radio on his hip started to crackle and his entire body locked up. He raced to switch the radio off, but not before a mix of static and his boss's voice crackled out. The creature snapped to attention, facing the sound. Putting one hairy limb in front of the other, the creature started to slowly make its way towards Jim. Gritting his teeth, Jim walked backwards, trying not to make any more noise. The creature dragged itself forward, slowly closing the gap between them. Every foot forward it moved, the creature appeared larger than before. At the current pace, it was only a matter of time before the creature caught up to him. He knew nothing good would come from it catching him. Turning around toward the elevator, he did the only thing he could think of: run. Breaking out into a sprint as fast as his feet would take him, clattering against the floor. The creature picked up its pace, barreling into the hallway after him. Glancing over his shoulder, Jim could see the creature taking up the entire width of the hallway. Its fur brushed up against the walls as it ran after him. The elevator looked so close, but it felt like running on a treadmill trying to get back. He remembered the deceptively long walk out to the alcove and knew he would be in for a long run back. Pushing himself to run as fast as he could, he didn't look back, only focusing on the elevator up ahead. He could tell from the thunderous vibrations that the creature was still chasing him. Jim was starting to feel winded and his legs were starting to cramp, but he knew he couldn't stop moving. The elevator looked so close now, but he knew that meant nothing. It was impossible to gauge how much running he had left before he'd reach the doors. All he could do was run and pray that he was faster. The last few feet of the hallway surprised him in an instant, sending him plowing full speed into his cleaning cart. Jim and the cart both slammed to the ground, sending an explosion of supplies scattering in the elevator. He knew he had no time to worry about that or the pain in his side. Fighting back up to his feet, he lunged at the control panel, pressing the door close button as fast as he could. Watching the creature barrel down the hallway, he was unsure what would win the race: the doors was or the creature. The doors started to slide closed and Jim let out a sigh of relief. A moment later, he could hear the creature hit the door, colliding at full speed. His relief was short-lived, realizing he hadn't selected a floor. In a panic, he slapped at all the elevator buttons. The elevator gears wound slowly, ascending, pulling the elevator back up. Jim couldn't stop his hands from shaking as he tried to pick up his supplies, setting them back in the cart. He couldn't worry about that right now. He sat on the floor, panting and covered in sweat. Fumbling with the radio, he turned it back out and was immediately flooded with his boss's angry yelling. "Why aren't you in the basement yet?" "I accidentally got off on the wrong floor. I'll be right there, sir." That kind of reminds me of the elevator game that people used to talk about, kind of like an urban legend. The last story is by the user abalonetea. Abalonetea. Again, I'll put the things on the screen. I'll put them in the description because I can't pronounce things. This one was in the subreddit nosleep, and the title is "There's Something Living in the Mold." I noticed the stain the day I moved in. A damp, yellowish blotch spreading across the ceiling in the hallway. The old farmhouse smelled of dust and stale wood. It was clearly the kind of place that had history soaked into its bones. At first, I didn't think much of it. Houses settle, leaks happen. I had gotten this place at a steal. It was my second house, the first one since my divorce, the first one where I would be living solo. 2 floors, 1 basement, and a big L-shaped kitchen that I was dying to use. Of course, first I had to get everything unpacked, put away, remember which drawer held the butter knives and which one held all of the junk I didn't know what to do with. Basically, I should have been thinking about literally anything but the stain. The problem was, every time I walked into the room, my gaze was drawn up to that awful blotch. By the 3rd day, the stain had doubled in size. It wasn't just discoloration anymore. The edges darkened, turning the colour of rotting fruit, and a faint, sour smell clung to the air beneath it. I ran my hand along the ceiling, feeling for moisture, but it was dry. I set a bucket underneath just in case. This figures. Okay, so time to start saving for repairs, I grumbled, unhappy with needing to do this so soon into my ownership of the place. Still, the spreading stain was quickly forgotten. The sound that woke me that much, not so easy to forget or ignore. A soft, rhythmic tapping, like fingers drumming against wood. I held my breath, ears straining. Maybe it was a tree branch against the roof. No, the sound came from inside the ceiling. Slowly I rose to my feet, drifting through the house. I flicked lights on as I went and soon found myself standing beneath the stain. What the? The sound was definitely coming within the soured, putrid-looking mark. Once more, the step stool was collected and I pressed my hand against it. The thumping audibly continued, but I couldn't feel anything. I rapped harder on the mark, hoping that whatever creature was on the other side would be scared off. It didn't work. The sound went on for hours, was no longer empty. A thick, dark substance had dripped down. Not water, something viscous, like oil or blood. It reeked of copper and rot. My stomach turned as I dumped it outside. The stain had spread again, creeping toward my bedroom. I called a contractor. He told me it was just an old house settling, probably some bad pipes. He'd come by next week. I didn't like the thought of waiting that long, but what was I going to do, right? It's not like I could fix it myself. The stain was too large to be contained just by a bucket. I bought a tarp for $5 and laid it down instead, hoping that it would help save the flooring. That night I woke to scratching. A slow, deliberate scrape, like nails dragging against wood. It came from above me. My stomach curdled at the sound, heart skipping a beat. I flicked on the bedside lamp. A new stain had appeared right over my bed. I bolted upright, heart hammering. The tarp in the hallway was puddled with that black sludge. My hands trembled as I reached for my phone. I'd call a plumber, a priest, the cops even. Someone had to come out. That was the end of it. I hadn't even unlocked my cell phone before muffled voices began hissing through the cracks in the ceiling. I couldn't make out the words, but they were there, urgent, angry. I backed out of the room, my left foot coming down on the tap. The liquid splashed across the floor, thick and sticky, and something in the ceiling above me moved. I ran. It kept pace with me, scurrying through the ceiling above as I raced for the front door. As soon as I got outside, I ripped off my sock and threw it into the grass, desperate to get that foul sludge off me. I slept in my truck. When dawn came, I forced myself to go back inside. The stain had spread down the walls now, tendrils of black snaking toward the floorboards. The ceiling above my bed was buckled inward, like something had been pressing against it from the other side. Whatever was pressing against the ceiling was still moving. A slow, deliberate swell of the bulging plaster. My breath hitched as a single wet crack splintered through the wood. Then another. Then the whole thing ruptured. A gaping blackened hole bust open, spewing a shower of rotted wood and that sickening putrid sludge. And something else, something pale, slick and wrong, tumbled free. Limbs too long, fingers too many, its head lolling like a broken marionette as it heaved itself upright. It turned toward me. I didn't wait to see its face. My legs finally caught up with my brain, and I bolted, slipping on the mess, but catching myself just in time. The thing moved with me. Its spindly limbs clawing against the floor, a wet, slapping sound accompanying every jerky movement. I reached the front door just as I heard it speak. Not words, just a sound, a rattling inhale, then a breathless, choked out giggle. I slammed the door behind me and threw myself into the truck, fingers fumbling at the ignition. My hands were shaking so hard I nearly dropped the keys. But then, blessedly, the engine roared to life. In the rearview mirror, I saw the farmhouse, the thing standing just inside the doorway. It didn't follow me outside, didn't have a chance to, really, as I floored it down the dirt road, kicking up gravel. I didn't stop driving until I reached a motel 2 towns over. I paid in cash. Right now I've got every door locked. I've got all the lights on. I've checked too, just to make sure there aren't any stains in this room. I couldn't move again. Don't have the money for it, but I don't want to go back either. What if it's still waiting for me? Again, very creepy. They were a new creep show that came out. I say new, like I don't mean the original 80s ones. And one of the episodes that reminds me of is kind of similar, and it's about mold that grows all in this house. Yeah, that's really giving off the same vibes. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope it didn't scare you too much. Please let me know if you have any suggestions or if you would like a part 3 to this video. I appreciate